Better keep your fingers crossed. Make sure that red light comes on.
There we are.
We're set?
Jake just wants us to appreciate it, right?
Yes.
That's why he's gone.
Kinsey, you set? Katie, you set? Great. Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting of January 15th, 2019. This is technically our first council meeting of the year. 2 weeks ago we had a work session, but we didn't have technically a formal council meeting. So we're thrilled to get the new year started, and those that are joining us in person and by YouTube, you're glad you're with us. We'll start just to make sure we have a quorum by doing a roll call. We'll start with Councilwoman Ivy.
Ivy, present.
McEwen here.
Meekum here.
Fillmore, present.
So 4 of the 5 are present. I believe the other council member is coming, but we do have a quorum, so we can get started. So we will begin with prayer thought by our city manager, Steve Thacker.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to live in a land of freedom and enjoy peace and prosperity. We are grateful to those many who have gone before and sacrificed much to make those conditions possible for us. We're grateful for the privilege of self-government. Grateful to live in a community of people who volunteer and are willing to help one another. We pray at this time for our nation's leaders, our national government leaders, that they will be able to put aside partisanship and come together in a genuine spirit to resolve the impasse that currently is creating hardship for hundreds of thousands of families. We pray for the protection of all of our city employees as they perform their duties day to day. And we pray for this city council, ask Thee to bless them with wisdom and good judgment and a respectful dialogue this evening as they deal with the issues at hand and strive to keep our community a great place to live. This we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. Next on our agenda is if you would all stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're now at the portion of our meeting where we have an open session, and this is a time when anyone is welcome to come to one of these 2 microphones you see on the side and discuss anything that you would like to, or anything that may be on your mind. We do have a public hearing later about a Main Street issue. That's not part of this open session, but anything else that you may have on your mind, you're welcome to come up. Just state your name and where you're from.
We also have a second public matter for hearing to Mayor on the agenda on the South Main Street.
Sorry.
Just so they're aware, there's that opportunity as well.
Yes, yes.
Hi, I'm
Go
Larry.
ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm
Go
Larry.
ahead.
I'm Larry Peterson. This is my wife, Judy. I'm here to see about the restripping and repaving that's going on? Is this an appropriate time to talk about that?
That is one that's coming up, and it's so.
Should I wait?
Yes, because we'll have some introductions so you can
Okay,
learn about it.
okay.
And then the public will be able
Okay,
to
sorry.
comment. No problem at all. I didn't make that as clear as I should, so thank you. Is there any other items for the open session? If not, then I will close the open session and we'll go to the business of the meeting. The first item is the minutes review and acceptance from our January 2nd, 2019 special meeting. Council members, any modifications, changes to those minutes? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I'd make a motion to accept the minutes as prepared for January 2nd meeting.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Let's move to our summary action calendar. There's 2 items on the summary action calendar. Approve a recording secretary contracts and award bids for culverts under the DNR GW corridor. So is there any questions or comments on any of those issues on the summary action calendar?
We talked about this before. I just want to make sure we're still, Steve, the analysis still holds. When we talked about the pretty large variance between the bids, and the winning bid already had equipment that made this possible for the difference in price. If I remember correctly, for the culverts, because there's quite a delta between the award winner and the others.
Yes, there is quite a difference, and I don't know what I did meet with Randy and Kevin yesterday. They talked about the bid results. They did not comment on the reasons for the differences, and so they expressed confidence in the bid, the successful bidder. So now the materials are purchased separately.
Right.
But as I took a quick look at it, looks like there was quite a bit of difference in just the labor of laying the pipe itself, that line item, and then there was also a significant difference on the mobilization.
Yeah, I'm fine with the bid. I like to see a closer cluster, because this is all over the map as far as the bids go. So I hope they got it right.
Well, the engineer's estimate was about 75,000, so 2 of those, the second and third bidders, were right around that number, and the low bidder was quite a bit below.
Right.
It is a company we've used before, and our staff does have confidence in them.
Great.
Any other questions on the summary action items? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve the summary action items.
Motion to approve the summary action calendar as detailed.
Second.
Do I have a second on that? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote. Councilman Ince.
Aye.
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 Hey, let it be noted that summary action calendar passes 5-0.
And at this time, I would like to say I'm so happy that Katie's still here, and she does such an excellent job for us. She really does.
He does an outstanding
An
job.
outstanding,
Yes, standing job.
amazing job for us.
Well, and
We
we're,
don't want to go too far. She'll be wanting another raise.
and we're trying to hang on to her, yeah.
She is amazing. And we do appreciate it, and it is noticed.
She is one of the contracts we just approved on the summary action calendar. And
That comment might make it into the minutes.
Don't be misquoting me there.
And thank you, Katie, for all you do, you and Jamie, all that you do. Let's move to item number 3 on the agenda. This is the UDOT 2019 Main Street project. We have representatives from the engineering firm here that to brief us on this. You two, I don't know how you want to do it. You want to do one microphone, or just one of you going to present? Okay, just come up and introduce yourself and where you're from for our minutes.
My name is Santiago Loaiza. I am a consultant with Lochner Engineering. I'm also a Centerville City resident. So UDOT has a project it's a pavement preservation project maintenance project to mill and overlay Main Street, which is SR 106, from pretty much Bountiful to 400 North in Bountiful to Lawn Lane in the border with Farmington. The proposal is to, or what UDOT wants to do is mill 2 inches and then overlay 1.5 inches. As part of the project, they also fix any curb that is broken or that is sunken, that's creating drainage problems. There are also, normally when we do this type of project, the existing striping is just replaced after the paving. But in this case, there was a request from the city to make some changes to the striping at the north end of Centerville. So we're talking mainly from 1300 north to the north end. From 1300 north to the south end of the city, the striping is going to be pretty much what is there right now, which is 2 11-foot lanes and then a medium, left turn median 12 feet wide.
Now, Santiago, am I correct in understanding that the striping plan, though, on the south end did narrow that just a little bit? I know we requested if it could be narrowed even more, but doesn't the plan you're presenting represent a slight reduction, at least in the lane widths?
So when you go there and measure the existing striping, it's not very consistent. There's some places where the lanes are 12 feet wide, 12 and a half, 11 and a half. The project is going to make them consistent, so there'll be 11-foot lanes and a 12-foot median.
Okay.
So that is going to give a few more inches of feet in some cases to the shoulder to facilitate for parking and bicycles. Okay. There are 3 corrugated metal pipes crossing. There are 3 locations where part of the project is going to be replacing those for reinforced concrete pipe. And also, as part of this project, we're going to be upgrading some of the signs. Because of the type of project, it's a maintenance project, and the type of funding, we can only use about 1% of the allocated budget for the project to replace signs. But we think that will cover most of the signs that are outdated. Some are hanging on power poles. They will be replaced for freestanding signs with their own poles. So let's go over the changes in striping.
Now, you didn't mention handicap ramps, I don't think.
Correct. So because we are milling 2 inches, as part of the federal regulations, we need to evaluate all the pedestrian ramps along the corridor. There's about 150 of them. We looked at them and we made a list of the ones that were in compliance with current regulations and those that were not. And of those, we examine and see which ones we could fix. There are some that we cannot fix. We call them, it will be a lot of work, a lot of reconstruction that is not part of this type of project to fix them. And that would leave us about 55 that we're going to be reconstructing, replacing. And they're all along the corridor, different places. Okay.
And Santiago, before you go on to the striping plan, do you know whether UTA is are they coordinating their bus pull-out here in front of the post office with this project, or are you aware of that at all?
No. No.
They're putting a bus stop in across the street here at the post office. They're intending to do a pull-out for the bus. Mm-hmm. And I just was assuming that they had been talking to UDOT about that, but if not, then I need to make sure that they're coordinating that so they don't build it.
Yeah, that's
so that it's coordinated, the timing of the work.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that happening.
Okay, I'll send an email off to UDOT then.
Okay.
Is there any other pullouts or along Main?
The other 2 bus stops that are getting improvement along Main Street, or 2, 3, several of them, I don't remember how many, don't involve a pullout. Okay. They involve a concrete pad behind the curb, between the curb and the sidewalk, and a bus shelter in a few places.
Okay.
And I assume that there will be something to bridge the milled section for the fire department to get out still?
Yeah, the contractor will make
They deal
sure
with all of that.
And we are looking at, some of this work may take place at night. We're still evaluating all those options. We are also allowing the contractor between 24 and 48 hours that he can mill and leave the pavement the way it is with the mill, and the traffic can run on that mill surface.
So I have a question. Excuse me. When you say they're going to replace gutters that are broken or sunken, what if we're aware of one that is causing a severe problem by a school? Who would we get hold of to make sure that that's looked at before you do it?
Yeah. Do you want to be the point of contact for that, Steve? And then
Sure, sure. If you let
Send
me
it to me.
know, I'll forward that to you, Santiago.
Yes, please.
Okay.
We have walked the corridor and kind of made a list of where those areas. There's like this one that is very bad, I think it's across the street in front of the restaurant, the Taco Time. That's pretty bad in that area.
Well, there's a place over by the elementary school that the water actually doesn't make it to the storm drain, so it's frozen all the time in the gutter because it's not, just needs the slope fixed a little bit, but it's very dangerous for everybody that walks there, and it's right at the crosswalk.
Okay, yeah. If Steve, you can send me that information, we'll look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me what that is.
There are, I should also mention that we're all going to reconstruct that intersection of Center Street and Main Street to fix that problem with all cars bottoming out.
You just answered a question I was going to ask at the end, because I've had more than one resident approach me about that one in my office, so. Okay.
So yeah.
We'll let you continue on your briefing. Sorry if we threw you off.
No, that's fine. And as part of that Center Street, there's going to be, I forgot to mention, so the city is going to have a project that will go even before the roadway, where they're going to upgrade some storm drain and water line from
Right.
100 north to 50 south, I
Yeah.
believe. So what's going to happen on Center Street is they're going to remove that waterway and they're going to put catch basins, so that it will be a lot smoother, that transition for.
You won't have that big gutter dip there.
Yeah. Okay. So going, can we go to the one before? So this started at the north end. As part of the changes on the restriping, what is being proposed is to add left turn lanes at 3 intersections, 1700 North, 1450 North, and 1350 North. So what you're seeing there is the proposed striping at Jennings Lane, 1700 North. In order to accommodate the left turn lane at that location, because of the design speed on this road, we have to extend the striping, as you see there, to about 1825. So at 1825, we start transitioning the traffic. We accommodate this. The left turn lane is going to be a two-way left turn lane at Jennings Lane, because that street continues to the west, to the east, sorry. And you can see that at that point, the shoulders are going to be narrowed to about 5 feet. The next location to the south is 1450 North. So what you can see there is that we transition, after we put that left turn lane on Jennings Lane, by the time we transition back to not having a median, we are close to Ricks Creek, 1500 North. At that location, we continue without a median, just 2 travel lanes, and those travel lanes are 12-foot wide. As we continue, and then the 10-foot shoulders will be available at that location. As we continue to the south, then we again transition the traffic to accommodate the left turn lane at 1450 North. At that location, we have about a 4-foot shoulder in front of the church. So between 1500 and 1450 is going to be about a 4-foot shoulder on both sides of the road. And from 1450 to the south, the shoulder is 6 feet.
Now to clarify, Santiago, when you say a 4-foot shoulder, that's 4 feet of the asphalt, and then you have the gutter in addition to that, right?
Yeah.
A
That's the
2-foot
distance-
gutter or something like that, 2.5 feet?
Yeah, that's the distance, the shoulder we call is the distance between the stripe for the travel lane and the edge of the gutter. And then the curb and gutter is 2 feet for the gutter and then 6 inches for the curb. Now, as we continue to the south, there's not enough distance between 1450 and 1350 north to transition and get rid of the median and go back to providing the left turn median at 1350. So that's why you see that median is continued. And then in all that area, we have a 6-foot shoulder. Then from 1350 north, that median extends and ties about 1300 north is where the median, the current median ends. So that's,
So from this point south, you have a continuous center median for left turns in both ways,
correct, and that's all the way to the south end of the
similar
city.
to what we have now, but more consistently striped in width, as you were explaining.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The project schedule, we are anticipating to finish the design this month, advertise for construction next month. Then the utility project for the city will be early spring, and the construction for UDOT will be in the summer.
Which side of the parade does it straddle? Is it before the 4th of July parade or after? That's a huge issue for people.
It is a huge issue, and we have that into the specifications. Basically, that we don't let the contractor do any work or even have any traffic control during the parade days. I think the restrictions start like on the afternoon of the 3rd of July and then go through the 5th.
So is there a potential for milled off open surfaces during the parade? That's because,
No. It's one of the requirements is a no mill surface.
okay,
Yeah.
great.
A few years ago, we did, and the same thing applies for the tour of Utah.
In
So we
August?
Yes, so we have those dates in there. We'll have to see where the contractor is going to schedule his work, but we have those restrictions.
And you're not going to start until school's out, is that correct?
One of the restrictions is that they do the work in front of the schools when school is out. So they can start like doing pet ramps or doing other work or the utility work before, but that's not on the restrictions, no work in front of the schools until school is out. And we gave them the date, I think it's June 1st or so.
So it sounds like a pretty tight window to get this project complete.
It is, and it's tough because there's not a lot of room. That's why we're thinking that the contractor may have to work at night.
So are they, if they're not going to work until after school's out, does that mean they're also committed to be done before school starts?
We have again, the restriction is that they cannot work in front of the
Or
school
in front of the schools?
when school is in session. But I think we're having them be completed by, I believe it's August 31st or September 15th. We have a firm date for them to be done with the whole project.
Now, the construction methods would normally mean that they probably will do all the concrete work before they do the milling. Is that a correct assumption?
It varies. There's some, like the reconstruction of Center Street will have to be done first, so that they have that final surface to tie into.
But the handicap ramps and replacement of curb and gutter in spots, that doesn't necessarily have to be done before they start milling and paving?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with the anticipation of working at night, what are the night hours that you anticipate? Is this an all through the night effort, or are we talking knocking off at 3 in the morning? Or?
We're still discussing that, and we'll have to talk to Steve. I guess you're the one that issues that permit.
Well, my replacement.
No, we want you back for that.
Well, we'll have to, in the next few weeks, we have to decide what those restrictions are. What we've done in other municipalities is we restrict the activities they can do at night, like no jackhammering or some of those noisy activities. But we'll see. We'll have to have that discussion.
Can't wait till April, huh?
We're going
We
to
have
give
to
them
go
their
out to
phone
bid.
number if they jackhammer too early, too.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going out to bid next month, so.
So, Sonny, I have a question. You could make it really fun, the tour of Utah can make it a mountain bike race. Just kind of have it torn up as they come through. I've noticed as you run the course of Main Street throughout Centerville, the only place we have crosswalks is where there's schools or intersections. Can you speak to why there's not crosswalks in any other areas? Or is that a UDOT thing?
It's a UDOT thing, but their policy is that in order to accommodate a crosswalk, it has to be warranted. So there's got to be a pedestrian count, and their rule is that they have to have at least 20 pedestrians in a day use a certain location for them to put a
You're thinking about
crosswalk.
Maverick?
Yeah, and that would be one. I mean, especially when I see these handicapped people on their wheelchairs coming across that road, I'm just going, oh my goodness, you know?
Part of UDOT's problem with the one by Maverick is that the streets don't line up. So they won't put a crosswalk where there's not streets that line up. We've tried that one before.
Yeah. And you look at areas, and I'm not saying this because I live on this street, but you're putting 2 turning lanes down Jennings Lane. That's one street that continues through. Mm-hmm. And so you got people getting off buses there crossing all the time as well too. So I'm not necessarily, you know, trying to promote for that, but that's just a question. When I see a thing like this, a study like this, you're putting 2 turning lanes. And that to me means obviously that's a busier area, so. That's just a question.
Yeah.
Somebody else may have brought it up as well too, so I just wanted to get it out there.
Yeah, okay. And we did talk to the traffic engineer at the region, and it's, a lot of it is also is liability.
Yeah.
Because just to paint the 2 lines on the asphalt might not be enough. I mean, you may have to sign it, and then you have to provide advanced signing. It's not as simple as just doing striping.
But if there is an area where we think it might be warranted, would there be enough time between giving UDOT a heads up now and the project so that it could get painted at the same time? So for instance, I mean, that's a good point, a spot where there's bus stops and people are using that and crossing the street to get to the other side to get to their home. And if mayor has observed that that's being crossed regularly, then could we request UDOT to do that count and get that information in time to be able to paint for this project?
We discussed that internally, and it is, winter is not the best time to do those counts. Okay. So it did you say?
I would add that we could request that at any time, and then it's not a big deal to stripe a crosswalk afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really legitimate question, and anytime we think there is an area that meets those kind of counts, we should be asking for it to be checked.
And that's, yeah, exactly. And that's something else that we discussed, is that if the project is not going to go in until the summer, so if you have that information, you have the counts to back up the warranted crosswalks, they can still be added to the project at that time.
Because there are no crosswalks other than where there's schools and
And that's a very long stretch.
Yeah.
And there are regulars who ride that bus and cross every day. So, yeah.
It is, and it just allows people to cross wherever. It's basically, they call it
Controlled?
non-control crosswalk.
Before I have public, we'll have you stay up here and they'll just use this microphone. Councilwoman Fillmore was one that was at that meeting. Did you have anything you wanted to fill in further before I have the public come up?
Just that I continue to push, as I always do, for consideration on narrower lanes. We did a little bit of research to find examples of that. There are plenty of examples. The question is, are they UDOT roads? So UDOT has policy, and they're not moving into an area of flexibility at this point. So for this particular timing of this project, we won't be able to push for narrower. But
When you say narrower, are you talking about the travel lane should be narrower for
the
the
travel lanes
vehicles?
to give us just more flexibility in what to do with the excess of the right-of-way. But, so it's a question always worth asking. Our active transportation consultant who's running the study, the active transportation study for Bountiful and Centerville, was also there and agree strongly with that it's a question always worth asking. So they helped do that research, but that would be what I would report. Did we cover the fact that originally we were going to add a turning lane at Reading, and as we talked through, decided
No, I
against
didn't
that?
mention, we just talked about what the consensus was for the strike.
I felt like it was a good meeting. We had a lot of good discussion and collaboration, and it led to some positive changes to what was originally on the plan, I think so.
Thank you. Public, come on up here and ask any questions or make any comments. Just introduce yourself and where you're from for our records.
Larry Peterson. I live here in Centerville. I'm here kind of representing the dozens and dozens of cyclists that use this street out here. And we were all really excited when the work was done on the frontage road until it was striped. And if you're riding south, it's great. But if you're riding north, they actually took away some of the room that we had to ride before. And I want to make sure that, and I haven't heard anything except the Tour of Utah said about cycling here, and we don't give a hoot about them because they get the whole road both sides. What we're worried about is that few feet that are on the side of the road that we get, and that it shouldn't be reduced, and also the grates, how dangerous they can be if they're not placed over in the gutter and left out in the road. And I haven't seen anything here that suggests to me that there's been any consideration of all of us who take our lives on the street when those roads are widened, including my wife.
So is that the question?
Yes, that's a
the Lochner
question.
group here?
What's left for the cyclists after this restriping? I haven't gone out and measured. I don't know what 11 feet is and what 7 feet is, and what's left for us.
Overall.
Are we going to be scrounched up into the concrete gutter?
No. So currently, the shoulders are about 10 feet wide because there's no median. When we accommodate the median, the shoulder is going to vary. Like we shown that area at 1315 North, they're going to be 6 feet. So you're going to have 6 feet between the stripe and the edge of the gutter, plus 2 feet of the gutter. So
Will there be any striping for bicycle lane?
no, they will not. It
Okay,
will
so
just
we'll
a
still be out
shoulder.
in the traffic and cars will be honking at us.
So to your point, which is very valid, in the meeting that I was just referring to, we did have a bicycling representative. Mark Ulrichslager was there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very large part of our discussion. So at every point where we're adding a turn lane where it didn't exist before, we thoroughly discussed the impact that would have on the bicyclists. So
Okay.
you have two situations. One is the consistency of the lane striping. So you'll have more consistent, and in some areas gain a little bit of width for that bicyclist lane. The other question is where they're adding turning lanes and didn't have them before, then you lose some width.
Mm-hmm.
But we lose enough width that it actually makes it too narrow for on-street parking. And so in those areas, you don't have the conflict. So it's not ideal as far as having a separate lane or a designated bike lane, but in those areas where it gets a little narrower, I don't think you'll have the conflict of having to come around
Okay.
a parked car.
So the question is there going to be bicycle striping anywhere, or is it just an open lane?
Just an open lane,
It's
Okay.
going to be shoulder.
multi-use
A shoulder.
shoulder right
Yeah.
now. Mm-hmm.
So we
So
haven't
there will
lost.
be the white line striping on the side behind which the bicycles can ride. if that's what you're...
That's the question I'm asking.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, just
Yeah.
not designated bike lane.
Not designated, but it is there.
A white
Yes.
shoulder, striped shoulder. Mhm.
Just like you have on the
And-
south
and-
side of Centerville.
And except for these turn areas, it'll be about the same width.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real difficult issue when it gets wider and narrower, especially for cars, because they don't know where they're supposed to be.
And another thing on those turn lanes, because my concern was, right now you just stop in the lane of traffic, and I go up north a lot, and as I stop, this car behind me just flies out around, and the bicyclists are definitely not safe, because they're not looking over here. They see my brake lights, and around me, they go at 40. So having a turn lane, at least they'll be able to stay in their own lane and not go into the shoulder where the bicycles are.
That's great.
And so I felt like that was
I was going
safer
to
for
say
the
that
bicyclists.
those turn lanes are really great because it keeps people from.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about grates?
That's a really good question that I also had. I wonder if the grates can be changed to the grid grate.
So the grades are, there's only one location where there's not a bicycle safe grade. I don't remember the exact location, but everything else, it's all bicycle safe, so not, the tire of the bike will not go into those grades.
Okay, there's one on Porter Lane that's probably off the main road that is extremely dangerous. I don't know if that one's going to be addressed or not. It's just on Porter Lane, just after you turn off the road. It's a great, huge one.
East or west of Maine?
West of Maine. And it has grates on it that'll catch a tire easily if you're not careful. And I'm surprised somebody hasn't been after the city for a suit because they got caught on it.
Will the grates that are put down be the grid style?
The new ones, yes.
The new
New
grid
ones?
style?
Okay.
So much
Okay.
better. Yeah.
And they'll be moved into the
They will be in
The
the
concrete
gutter,
area?
correct, yeah.
okay, fantastic.
But that Porter Lane, it's good to make a note of that one
Yes.
because that
Yeah.
might be outside of the project, but maybe we can just try to
Can
replace
work it
it
in
with that
somehow.
style of
Correct.
grate at the same
Because
time.
it's a serious accident waiting to kill somebody.
Yeah.
We'll look into that one, Porter Lane.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate the comment. Very good. Very good comments. Further comments or questions?
Becky Wright, Centerville. Just wanted to voice my support in maintaining those, like was just mentioned, maintaining those side stripe lanes for the bicycles because we received a lot of public comment back in 2016 when we originally were considering this, and there was lots and lots of people here that talked about how often they use Main Street and why it's an important place for them to use their bikes and to cycle along there. So I just want to keep that in mind as you consider that. And then back to the crosswalk issues, I was actually wondering if there's any way that UDOT would do additional signage or lights or anything. Have you considered anything like that for, because I know you can at any moment, add a warranted crosswalk when it is needed, but it does take a little bit extra planning and consideration for flashing lights or for something that would allow people to push a button and then cross or something like that. What is required to get that to happen? And is this a location that could happen? So that's my other question. And then the last question, or the last suggestion or question I was going to ask, is there going to be anywhere where there's going to be a no parking posted for bicyclists so that they can actually, if that's a multi-use space on that shoulder, is it going to be multi-use but then it's filled up with parked cars so that then they're out into the traffic and then we've got a center lane that creates everything really, really tight and close? Or is it going to be posted at any point? And do we know, have you looked into how many cyclists use Main Street? And do you have numbers for that and to back up, what you're thinking about? So those are my questions, I guess.
Okay. So we are going to be upgrading the existing crosswalks for all the schools. And some of them, the flashes are not working well, or they're going to be upgraded to the new standard. Something else that is going to happen is, I believe Centerville City is going to put advanced signs on the side streets so that as part of this project, we can also do crosswalks on the side streets as they join Centerville. The second question, there are no
Can we
plans
go
to-
back to that really quickly? Because you said that the lights aren't working, but we don't actually have any lighted crosswalks. We have school
Yeah, the school, yeah,
school
the
zones.
school flashers.
But I'm talking about actual, just designated crosswalk lighting.
Like Main Street in Salt Lake, they have not only the flags, but
They
between
push a
3rd and 4th
button.
South,
Flashers.
you can push a button. and
Not
it
a thing that goes
turns
up
on
and
the
around,
flashers.
but
Yeah,
it's
but the
just a
flashers,
thing
yeah.
on the side that
Yeah.
shines, and you just push the button, and then you wait, and then it tells the kids that they can go across.
We have that on Parrish and Main.
Well, that's like.
That's a signal.
That's a signal.
Right, but we also have the hands that tell them whether they can go or not.
Yeah.
I'm
it's
saying
part- it's
not
part
at
of
a
the
signal,
You're
just
talking
at
when
a
you're not at
crosswalk.
a semaphore.
Just at
Yeah.
a crosswalk, like,
Yeah.
there's lots of options at crosswalks. They can have a flag, but those usually get taken, or they're all on one side, so it doesn't always work, because people are going one way. But a lot of times, there's just a light, and it's not a big thing that goes
Yes.
over. It's just a light, and you just push the button, and then,
Yes.
then they are waiting to tell, and then the lights start flashing, and then they can go across.
Yes. No, there are no provisions to do that with this project. It's a maintenance project, so it's basically, the funding is just for mill and overlay the road. We're doing a few things on the side, but we are limited on what we can do with this type of project.
Okay, and what would warrant, so the follow-up question to that is, what would warrant something like that being put in? So like, how do you know if you've already said the counts for crosswalk.
Pedestrian counts,
But then, how do you know when a crosswalk would need something with additional signage?
I think it's, again, the pedestrian count. If you have hundreds of people using one particular location, then there's consideration to do a hawk or another type of pedestrian signal.
So it doesn't relate to how the speed on the road is?
No, I don't know, if you probably have seen the hawk on US 89.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that it stops the traffic. That is because lots of people use that particular location.
Well, I wasn't looking for a stop traffic one. There's multiple levels. I was just wondering if there was, specific requirements to get to a certain level. But,
The ones,
yeah, keep going.
Okay. The last question was the no parking signs. There are no plans to put no parking signs. Just maintain the ones that are currently in front of the junior high for a certain period of time during the day.
Okay.
But no additional no parking signs. We are just letting the width of the shoulder mandate. I mean, if it's not wide enough, people are not going to park there, in theory.
Right. Okay, so people will still be able to park there. So I just want you to consider that in doing that, if we're making the side of the shoulder smaller and we're parking there, then is it effectively going to create a safe situation for cyclists if we have a turn signal on those certain areas? So that's just something to consider.
Yeah, and to that, I'll just say that that will be a policy question, and we'll have the active transportation plan that will give us a lot more information, and then we'll be able to dive into those policy questions as far as what our options are.
Fantastic, thank you.
Keep coming and bugging us.
So who over UDOT, is it the Region 1 director that is over this project? Or
There is
is
a
it somebody
project
else?
manager on Region 1.
Okay,
Yeah. Daryl Valentine, he's the
okay,
person.
that's different than from what we,
Right,
from
it's
the
not
Chris
Chris
Peters,
Peterson.
which is, we have a new one now. Chris Peterson has gone
Chris-
somewhere else in UDOT, so,
Yeah, Chris was replaced by Lisa Wilson,
yeah.
but one of her staff members will be the project manager, and that's Daryl Ballantyne.
Okay.
He's mentioned,
Yeah. And Steve has been in contact with him.
yeah.
So, Steve, you've been taking good notes for us. I think, Tiffany, you've been taking good notes as well, too, right? Of all these comments as well as others, so we can make sure we follow up on these and get answers back from UDOT. Do we? You bet. Yeah, we got to catch you on YouTube. Chance to be a superstar. Movie
Perfect.
star.
First time ever. So my name is Tiffany Carlson. UDOT has hired Santiago and myself at our company to do the design and also the public outreach for this project. I will be staying on this project throughout the construction. of the project, and so we can come back and give you updates as you request them or need them, as the construction starts and continues. And once we get a contractor on board and we know what their schedule will be, we can come back and communicate those timelines to you so that you guys know how it'll work with school and the 4th of July parade. And so I'm working with the design team and also with UDOT, and then I will also be working with the contractor to kind of be the liaison for all of these different types of interactions that need to take place. So feel free to contact me in the meantime. Steve has all my contact information. And then throughout the duration of the project, we will be, we'll have a hotline and an email and all of that for the public for this. So if the public has questions as well, it will ring to me and my public outreach team to help throughout the whole construction season. So
On the public outreach side, when you're reconstructing these ADA crosswalks, do you do any noticing when the crosswalk's going to be closed? And do you ensure
Yes.
that there's, because on the east side, we're dealing with hills, if somebody comes down that hill and there's no effective crossing, they're
Right.
stranded?
So they'll be signing, the contractor would sign those. We also will be providing weekly email updates. And so we'll put our information out through the same methods where we got the information out for this. And if there's other places that will be good for us to put that information, we're happy to share that as well. And then if people, we will send out an email on a weekly basis with what the work will be for the upcoming week, and try and capture as many people as we can through those methods as well. And so, yeah, we can update those. We have a weekly meeting usually with the contractor where they outline what they'll do for the next couple of weeks, and we can help share that information in advance of the work.
So that suggests that we should, we'll get that weekly update. We should put it on our website, and in a newsletter in advance of the project, we should tell people they can go to our website and get the latest.
Yes, and get our contact information and sign up for the email updates and all of that. They can do that through us. So I'm happy to share that information and notify people in advance. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Public, anything else from the public? If not, I guess we're moving on to approving this proposal for submission to UDOT. I'm not
And let me clarify.
sure what.
Correct me, Santiago, if I get this wrong, but, I mean, it is UDOT's road, and they make the final decision, so this is actually a request, a recommendation from the city council that UDOT incorporate this striping plan in their project. It doesn't guarantee that they're going to accept it fully, but are you confident that they will? Okay, so I think the motion would be that you...
Is that endorsing a letter from the city council, or is this by resolution we'd ask them to incorporate it? What language we're looking for there?
I would say a motion of the council endorsing the striping plan that has been presented.
Is there some subject to getting some answers on a couple of these things, or?
And the striping plan is the 8-page presentation.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah, I don't know that any of these questions actually affect the striping plan, but, so, I don't think they do.
You could if you painted a crosswalk.
Yeah, the crosswalks are going to involve some additional evaluation and study, which can be done, at any point in time. If UDOT isn't willing to do the warrant study, then the city has to decide whether it wants to pay to do the warrant study at those locations.
Has somebody gone through and checked to see what the minimum
The narrowest point behind
the narrowest point
behind the white line?
between the white line and the edge?
I'm thinking
Yes, it's 4 feet. Yeah.
That's what it is now, and it will
In
still,
some areas of the city, that's what you have.
and still that will be the narrowest when we're done.
Correct. And it's close to 1450 North, right in front of the church there, the LDS chapel.
But the message for the south end, from 1300 south, is that generally speaking, you'll have, in at least some places, you'll have more than what they have now. behind that white line.
That's what that's.
Well, and especially at 1450 North, I see a lot of people who take more than they should of the road to make their left turn, and it causes traffic to bulb out and around at speed. So if there's a bicyclist there, they're not going to see them. So I'm happy that they're going to align that.
It would be much safer.
So I would recommend a motion endorsing the striping plan as presented tonight.
I'd be willing to make a motion that we endorse the striping plan that's been presented to us tonight for recommendation to UDOT.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I didn't need to do a roll call, or do I? Okay. Thank you, Santiago. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, residents. Santiago, thanks for being a resident as well. Tiffany, I'm sure there's a home available somewhere if you want to live in Centerville.
And Mayor, if I could say why these two are here, and they could pass this along. I've been really pleased with the effort UDOT has made to cooperate with us in planning this project, not just this striping issue, but the drainage and coordinating our own utility work and the Center Street work. It's been a great partnership. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. All right, let's move to item number 4 on the agenda. This is a public hearing item. We are going to have this introduced to us by staff. I believe Corey Snyder, you're covering that, aren't you? Great.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, as you recall, back in early December, the council, a few council members brought up some concerns with the South Main Street corridor plan and some edits, particularly in relation to some elements that the council members were uncomfortable with the fire department. We quickly prepared some edits for your following meeting to address those two elements, the front setback and the side gap setback. You then voted to initiate an amendment to the zoning ordinance for those edits, and we took those to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission reviewed those on January 9th at their meeting. They received a recommendation from staff. In a twist of events, the recommendation from staff was split. It was split on denial, recommending from staff to deny the setback for the distance of front setback distance, and to approve the gap feature changes and additions to them. What we discovered during our analysis of the general plan, our general plan actually caps setbacks in the South Main Street corridor, caps it at 25 feet. So to go deeper would require us to amend the general plan. We'd only noticed for the zoning ordinance, we had not set the procedures in for a general plan amendment. It takes additional steps to do general plan amendments. So our recommendation to the Planning Commission was denial for the language of the general plan for one amendment, to approve the gap amendment by adding some features to the existing design standards. So it wasn't limited to a couple of features that could fill in the gap. We added some flexibility to have additional features to it. Planning Commission held their hearing and debated it. I refer to their minutes for their findings that they found in there. I tried to summarize. There were a lot of differing opinions in that discussion. Ultimately, the Planning Commission, essentially what I gathered from their discussion, and try to capture it in the transmittal report to you, they felt a little uncomfortable with the narrowness of the edits. They felt it would be more, the term used as a more holistic approach. The example, I think, Commissioner Daly, I think, said it. He raised some concerns that the Planning Commission had put some effort, what they thought was a splitting up of the issues of the South Main Street corridor. They look at it previously in your work sessions as 3 issues. Looking at the uses, looking at the design standards, and reconsidering anything in issues of density. In summary, when they sent that work up to city council. The city council dialogue indicated that maybe it needed a broader approach before adopting the uses, which it's still on the table. But some of the discussion from the council was maybe we need to look at the other parts of the plan first before you address the use list associated with it. The discussion on these edits was a return to that discussion that the council had, that these were narrow edits and should be looked at the broader sense. Some of that may have been taken from, I did introduce to the Planning Commission in the meeting our latest work session that we were moving forward with some general plan discussion and changes. I don't know how much that influenced it. I do know that I took the position that the edits at this point in time, given how fast we're moving, may in essence render themselves irrelevant in the long haul. But the Planning Commission felt like they wanted to see it more as a holistic approach and felt the edits were too narrow, so they chose to forward a recommendation for denial for both edits and would rather see us go back to the general plan and the design standards on those timelines and take a look at it from that perspective. So they recommended denial on the edits. So split decision or split recommendation from staff and a dual denial from the Planning Commission is what's being recommended to you tonight on those edits.
So questions for Corey?
If I could just add one thing to the staff presentation. I did prepare ordinance 2019-01 with both edits because that's what was requested by the City Council. So I didn't necessarily go with the Planning Commission's recommendation, but wanted to prepare an ordinance for your consideration if you want to move forward with it. However, in my opinion, I do not believe that you should adopt Section 4, which talks about the amendments to the front yard setback, because it is inconsistent with the general plan, and that is the one factor that our code provides for you to consider text amendments. So I think it would be very poor precedent for you to approve that section of the ordinance without the being inconsistent with the general plan. And we can give you some options later of what you can do.
I'll have some questions for Corey, but I would like to hear public comment if there is any, and then come back to that in case they have some additional stuff.
Thank you, Corey. Hang around, don't leave yet. So at this point in time then, this is just an internal city matter, so there's no applicant on this, so we will go to the public hearing portion. And so the public hearing is now open. Anybody that wants to comment, come up to the microphones like before. If no comments from the public, then I will close the public hearing. And it sounds like we may have some questions from council members. Do we?
I guess I get to start. So in reviewing a lot of what I've heard from the Planning Commission, and there'll be some summary after this that talks a little bit about what I've heard. Some of the things, the comments that were made is, one of them, and I'm going to paraphrase, it's probably going to be wrong. Why are we doing this? The fire station is already built and they're happy with what they have, is basically the summary. I'm confused because the last public minutes that the Planning Commission has with where Chief Bassett came in, it's on page 6 of the minutes for, what is this? This is September 12th. It states in there that, I'm going to read this, it says it was adjacent to where very heavy vehicles were required to exit the area quickly, therefore posing a serious safety hazard. Yeah. I have not heard the chief's position change on that in any public meeting. Am I incorrect on that?
I think you have, and I've heard it twice since that September meeting. The chief has said to me directly twice and once to you that the fire department is good where it sits. They may not be necessarily happy with everything that occurred, but they're good to move forward from where they're at with their approval. Now, if you choose to add to that, I don't think the fire department he would be regretful of that and be happy for it. But you've heard it, and I've heard it twice. You have to go back to our session that we had.
I can't tell you when, not to be disagreeable, but I believe stressing the fact that he's not necessarily happy, but he's satisfied with where things sit is the way I would state what Corey has said.
Yeah.
Can I comment as a fire commissioner or a member of the fire board?
Please.
Do I need to come down here as a member of the fire board? And
I think, yeah, you just need to make it clear that you're not wearing your mayor's hat if you're going to make that comment.
we had a meeting with the board yesterday, okay? And I specifically spoke to the fire chief, and these were more or less, he said that the plaza that's being required of him, he has concerns about that plaza and the cement design, and that it's a thinner cement, and you have this design in it, and you got these 80,000-pound trucks that will be driving across that plaza, and it will cause, in his opinion, wear and tear that would be more than ordinary cement if that was the case. So that cost would add up. There would be more replacement.
Yeah,
so
that's
what was said to us as fire board members.
Yeah, he has that position. I think that's consistent, but it's also consistent that he's said that at this point with what's going on, he will move forward with what he's approved as.
I felt bad watching the planning commission because I didn't feel like they had all the information we did as far as the fire station. I felt like Logan realized, I mean, I'm not doing this for the fire station. This is something I'm okay with for all of Main Street, but I don't think it's right that we change it 3 weeks after the fire station has to comply, because we're hurting our residents, because we're getting a better designed fire station by changing that now. And I think if the planning commission had had a little more of that information, they may have been a little bit different.
The thing that
you always could venture that. I mean, there's other ways to solve that issue than just wait for these edits to pass. But
that's what I was going to say, is that I've already seen the process at work and the flexibility that is built into that definition of plaza. The grid-lined cement, my understanding is that was the fire station's architect's recommendation.
Correct. We've had since conversations with the architect and look at alternatives that they could come back and
I've
amend
been
it,
through
but
design.
That was their proposal. It
I've
was
been
not a
through design
code
processes a lot of times, and there is still a lot of room for some creative work to be done to fill the intent, to keep intact the intent, the principle behind what's there in the Main Street plan, and still fill the needs and alleviate the concerns that the fire station has. I just think we still have available to us a win-win solution without jumping ahead of the more thorough, the more holistic Main Street process, without jumping ahead and passing an ordinance that's in contrast to our general plan, which procedurally would be an incorrect move on our part. I feel strongly about that we still have available to us win-win solutions and just need to still have a little creativity and discussion to get there.
I've had this with staff on talking about options for the fire department. Again, I think I've repeated in the work session, the score marks was not a code requirement. That's their position to satisfy the code requirement. They first started out with colored concrete. Then they went to the scoring plan. Now, truth be told, we had several discussions on options, and those are suggestions that came up in the dialogue. So it wasn't just created all on their own. But that was their proposal, was the score marks. So they can come back in and amend their site plan and come up with a different alternative, because the score marks are not tied to the language of the ordinance. It says you have to do this, come up with something, and we can take it back through an amendment process with the Planning Commission. Another one that has been talked about is the score marks are not the entire apron of the apparatus area. It is adjacent within the first 10 feet of the sidewalk system. So another option is if you did fail to move forward in a timely manner with these other changes to that we were going to go towards the general plan and the ordinances and whatever that entails out, that section can still be bonded for and replaced. Now, it makes less sense to pour the way you want it and then to replace it, but you're still looking at X amount of dollars that could be in a worst case scenario, bond for that. Then when it follows through, which I've anticipated and say openly, that those kind of elements will drop out of the way or at least be more flexible, then they can move forward without having to replace it back into the score marks. And right now, the architect has said, I don't have time, I think I've repeated this, I don't have time to come up with a new courtyard design because I've had to readdress where the elevation of the building sits versus the apron and its tie into Main Street. They've had to change that elevation. And so they have to go back to UDOT to amend their approach permit. And that's what he was working on and said, it's going to take me into January to do that. So I'll come back with some changes. So I said in the meeting, I think the elements are a little bit moot. The city council is already moving past this point, and the fire department has options to change. So I don't think these two edits are that critical, but the council felt like they were.
Well, to go back to what you're saying, Tammy, nobody's going to try and cram something through that's not going to get past Lisa's legal opinion. And that's just not going to happen. The clarity of the general plan amendment was not available to us when we initially talked to staff. So correct. This is new information as of this meeting for us to consider. So I think correct. That will come into play. In terms of the holistic nature, I agree with the concept of holistic nature, but with the fire station, it is a different animal and it does have a window of opportunity that closes. They need to be operational this fall. That dictates you can go backwards from that. There are certain dates they're going to have to hit. So as far as the window for opportunity, for negotiation, for redesign, creativity, I see that as 90 days, 120 days if we really push their schedule. It's not a huge window left available. Now, if Bill, if I'm totally misunderstanding what the chief says and he's willing to come back and say, I am totally fine, and go on the record and say, I'm totally fine, and we're done, I'm great. I guess I heard his concerns loud and clear about getting somebody possibly killed next to his fire station in responding to a call. Now, I will, full disclosure, I have my own personal experience with it. I saw a kid get clipped by an ambulance that was responding to a call. Didn't even see him. And now that was around a school. It was a different situation. But I am very sensitive to that. It's not a theoretical, an emergency vehicle responding. If they hit somebody, and we've asked the chief this question, they have to stop and render aid there. So whoever they were responding to gets the next vehicle. Yeah. So in that regard, yeah, I probably have reacted very strongly to that and have let that color a little bit of what I'm looking at. But I don't see that as become in any way less significant as we look at the design elements.
But I think you need to separate the chief's comments that he's talked to you about. There's a difference between benches and gathering area that was originally discussed versus a colored concrete versus a striping plan.
Right.
Those inherently don't change the risk. You have a pedestrian thoroughfare with the sidewalk. That doesn't change the risk. The gathering area, the sign area, things that make people stop, that's the element that's different. Now the chief has talked to you and has said, and the mayor correctly indicates, that he's worried about the thickness of the concrete and the spalding. Mm-hmm. And there's a construction standard to solve that problem without any worry today. It may not alleviate the chief, but he needs to talk to the architect and engineer to address that concern. If the score marks are still unsatisfactory, there's still opportunities to change.
Right.
Within that window of time frame.
What I'm going back to is in our recorded minutes, we have comments where you've told us effectively if the setback goes back far enough, it relieves the need for a gathering area or plaza.
And we've done that with a different design already.
So I still having a disconnect on that as far as that's done and that's the plan.
If you go to the Planning Commission's approval, there is no gathering area. They substituted the score marks along the sidewalk system and counted that loosely in my opinion, loosely as the plaza.
And again, if the score mark question can't be resolved as far as cost and vulnerability to breakdown by talking to the construction and engineering specialists, I firmly believe there are other, I mean, as a quasi-designer, I'm sitting here right now brainstorming and coming up with multiple possibilities. So,
Yeah, so the courtyard is not present in the apparatus. If this changes the setback, so let's just pretend we can go back to the general plan and quickly change the 25-foot cap, which you can. It takes the hoops to go through, but you can. All the courtyard elimination would do is not to do the score marks adjacent to the public sidewalk.
and the other thing to remember,
That's the only thing left that we're having a maintenance issue question about, and they can solve that with alternative. So if there was benches, if there was seating areas, if there were viewing areas that were required at the commission level, then I think that is the courtyard or this change is critical. But if you look at the Planning Commission's approval and what's currently approved on their site plan, it is a very, very weak implementation of the exchange for the additional setback.
the other thing to remember, whether it's supporting a yay or a nay vote on the idea of the increased setback, is that that's only for the civic district or civic lot type. And so the application of it would be extraordinarily narrow anyway. So that might support, well, then that's why I feel comfortable voting yay. Or you could say, which is what I lean towards, I want to go back to the principle of how a planning process should go about. And I want to stick to the principles of that and the principles of the process that this should be gone through before these kind of changes are made. And just to use that word again, a more holistic approach before I jump in and make this kind of decision. And so then I would lean on, well, we're only talking about it affecting this one situation. Why make an ordinance change when we're saying this situation can be resolved in these other ways?
I would just say the reason we're doing it is because we're creating a better public facility for all of our community. And so I feel like we're doing the community a favor by creating it to be better. But I'm wondering if we should break these in two and go ahead and make a motion that we approve Amendment 1, and then we can discuss Amendment 2 further, but at least get Amendment 1 so that we've got less to talk about. Staff has suggested that we do approve Amendment 1.
Yes, I think we just added elements that add to the options for the gap rather than restrict it to a couple of elements.
So I'd like to put that to a vote and then go ahead and discuss Amendment 2 and maybe a general plan.
So the question that I have is, to the Planning Commission's point and why they voted no on that, was it's not that we're necessarily against looking at an idea like this, it's that it's jumping ahead of the process that the council has said they do want to more holistically review the entire Main Street ordinance. And so if there's no pressing need in front of us to make that change, which applies to the entire overlay and not just the civic lot type, why are we doing that now? Because that one certainly isn't needed to address a concern by the fire department at that time. So I would just say I would just recommend strongly that we just push pause on doing that and letting it be part of the holistic process.
Well, I'll make a motion that we pass Amendment 1 for the CZZ 12.48.100 General Development Standards.
I'll second it so we can debate it.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second, so it's now open to debate that motion.
So why is it that we're wanting to jump ahead and do that now? Does anyone have an answer to that question for me?
My personal opinion is it makes Main Street better. I mean, I didn't even realize this existed until this came before me. And I don't think we have a Main Street like Bountiful that we want 15 feet or less in between our buildings. So if it will help us get a better fire station, and like I said, I wouldn't do it just for the fire station. I feel like it creates a better Main Street.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but wouldn't that be part of that more holistic discussion that involves open houses and drawings and public input and the process through the planning commission of looking at that entire overlay rather than saying, well, as a council, I have a personal opinion that I want to just kind of take this one little piece of a very holistic plan and jump ahead and do something on it now.
But we know that the very holistic plan is already dead, and Corey's told us that the Main Street plan no longer functions as it is. So since the fire station is in the process, and this has the potential of improving the fire station plan and being beneficial to the tax dollars being used for the fire station, I'm comfortable with going ahead with it, knowing that this is the direction I'm going anyway.
Now I'm very confused because this 15 feet on the side wouldn't change, according to my understanding, the plan the fire station has in place right now. Corey, is that a correct understanding?
Well, if it's not going to change it, then let's just go ahead and... Sorry.
Well, it does change it. There's your apron, which is the, for lack of better terms, the courtyard plaza, the controversial courtyard plaza with...
The one that doesn't exist.
Yeah, the one that doesn't exist. But there's an extension of that arcs with a sign location. And what this language would do is allow that extension to change and for the chief to use different set of elements for that gap than what was currently proposed.
And staff recommends approval of that, correct?
Yeah, because I think the gap issue, the extension of the undefined courtyard is a separate issue than the gap. Right now, they're tied together slightly in the design of the fire station, but you know, I think I've mentioned it before, and we've talked with the architect and even the chief as I met with him a week ago. You know, that could be, instead of the historic marker sign and the gap element, that can become their station 83, is that what it is? 83 sign, and Hogan can put a inlay of the badge as part of the sign area, and that would function as like a landscape wall area with that sign and a flower bed out front, and you don't have the extension of any gathering space in the side yard. So it's a minor change, but it's a change.
So
And I think it's a beneficial one.
Possible, like less cement required?
Again, is back to, I think the Planning Commission, for right or wrong, has tried to minimize the requirement, and that's what came up in the minimization of the requirement. And I think this amendment allows other features that they could choose to do it with.
This is going to be a subjective question that I'm going to ask you, but do you feel like the ordinances that we had in place, although they've been applied weekly, have pushed the fire station design to be higher quality for the community than it would have been otherwise?
That's a really subjective question, because
I would say take the fifth on that one, because that's a tough one.
Certainly, as the architect reviewed the materials, the design of the station, he certainly had to take into account what those design elements were in the plan. The harder part to ask is whether that design was increased beyond a template of the fire station as originally envisioned. And I wouldn't be able to say positively, here was the template of a good fire station, here's the city ordinance, these are the elements we added to that template. I think the architect would have, and the chief would have to answer that. You know, subjectively, the fire station was already heading in that direction to begin with. How much it influenced the change of that template, because if you look at the split block in the design of your display on the fire station from a long time ago, you know, those already contain some of those elements. I just don't know I haven't done an analysis to find out what that template was versus what the ordinance produced is a differentiation. So certainly it influenced it, but I don't know if you could say substantial or slight degree at this point. So that's my long version of plead the fifth.
So in going on record about this, I've made this statement before, I'm going to make it again, because I've had people come to me and say, you're bending over backwards to help the fire station out. I will say they are a beneficiary. They're not the only one in the corridor that would benefit from it, but anything that I can do as an elected official to foster good public safety, that the money is spent in the right place. I'll be perfectly blunt. If I need the fire department, I don't care what their building looks like. I want good equipment, I want well-trained people, and I want them to come protect my property and my life in a timely fashion. That's the mission of the fire department. Could they do that out of a Walmart-style cinder block building on Main Street? They certainly could, and it would look horrible. I don't believe, based on the concept drawings we've seen, that's their intent. But if there are ways to make sure that they are stretching the taxpayer dollar, if that's, we let them put in 4 bushes and call that the gap fill, that to me seems like the best stewardship of public funds. And that's where I come down on that is that pretty versus functional versus, you know, it really comes down to me that I'm going to support their function for what they're supposed to do. And if that does not provide the best quality in terms of beautification, I'm going to live with that, and I will be okay with that, because that's not what that's not what I have a fire station for. So in terms of this amendment, I don't really have a problem with it as far as bringing that forward, because I can straightforward see that they will be a beneficiary. I can also see other people along the corridor, other businesses that will be a beneficiary. In terms of addressing the holistic nature and the sequencing, because that was definitely an issue the Planning Commission brought up, was what is the sequencing, why does this make sense? There may be other opinions. Mine is that I am looking at a specific problem, and I'm trying to make sure that specific problem gets solved before we have the architect spend more money, or we bond and then tear something back out. That to me is, that's an unjustifiable perspective to say, we said put something in with the full intent that we know you need to rip it out and replace it. I don't know how I can justify that anywhere.
My intent was we would change before they'd have to replace it.
Right, and that's
You're
where
right,
I'm
I
saying,
can't guarantee it.
we can't guarantee it. We know we have a short window. And I
Well,
would
and
like
the
to
other
make sure we're
problem
in that
is,
window.
it's not, I apologize for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
But
I was
to the
going
point, we've already got an issue where the architect's behind, and so we can't deal with this. And so let's give things as much room as we can.
So I wanted to go back to one of Robin's points that you made, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Are you saying that 6 months from now, if we are successful with the help of the Planning Commission, coming up with a retooled Main Street, South Main Street corridor plan, that this would have been in it?
Yes,
I think so.
I think so.
Because we're not Park City Main Street, and we're not Bountiful City Main Street. And I don't think it makes sense to try to force that on something that isn't that on any part of the Main Street. I mean, to try to create that from scratch would be one thing, but where we've got already the buildings there, and that's never been the standard for any of them, it really doesn't make any sense to hold people to that when it doesn't work on anything we've got so far. I'm in favor of voting for it.
Any further debate before we take a vote?
I think we call the question.
Okay, call the question. Councilwoman Ivy.
Aye.
This is on the call to question or on the amendment?
On the amendment one.
How about on the amendment?
I think it's on the amendment.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's
No,
on-
when you said call the
Either way,
question, it's
sorry.
like making sure procedure was okay.
it's on
And
a
this is
motion
just
and
on
this-
the amendment to
amendment one?
1248-100.
Yes,
Robin's on the
just
amendment piece.
Amendment 1, it was, there was a motion and a second for. That's what we're
Okay.
voting on.
Aye.
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 I'm going to vote no, but I want to comment that it's not that I'm against the way the amendment's written, it's that the support of the Planning Commission's recommendation and the order of the process.
Aye.
So that motion passes 4-1. So as far as these other amendments, Are we going anywhere else with those?
Well, in order to pass the ordinance, we're going to have to either keep it or tear it out. So
Right.
going back
They're
to
in there.
So let me just get a categorical statement from you, Corey. If Section 2, the amendment, is removed because we don't have a general plan amendment, does it make any difference if you were to fast forward in time, you made a general plan amendment, it makes no impact to the fire station at this point from your perspective?
Well,
Because I would be willing to leave it in there subsequent to a general plan amendment or making it effective on a general plan amendment, but I don't know if that's necessary. You're convincing me that it's not, but I want more of that.
Yeah, I'll give you categorical with a little bit of context to the categorical. I'm going off my face-to-face conversations with the chief. He told me specifically he's moving forward with his plan as approved.
But he would prefer to have this in it.
That's not the issue that he would prefer, but he's moving forward with the plans that are issued. That he says, I'm good, his word, I'm good, you know that. And these were over the multiple subjects that we were talking about. And he goes, I'm good with that. That doesn't mean he's pleased as punch. No, that doesn't mean he's pleased. He's good to move forward. He's moving forward, he's doing it. So with that, back to the context, I've discussed with the architect options to go in and amend the approved site plan and take it back to the Planning Commission for the amendment. And I believe that some of the discussion in trades are sixes. I don't know if the commission will agree with that, but I agree that the trades are sixes. And so the amendment is a feasible thing to do for the fire department if they want to get out of the scoring concept and the increased maintenance. So it's really a call by the fire department. To me, they're moving forward. If they want to make a change, they have an option to go in and request amendment, see how that plays out. If that amendment doesn't play out, then the issue of the 190 days, whatever the time frame, is he just go back to the default, I'm moving forward as is, or does he wish somehow to sponsor another application or to have the council sponsor another application? And then the last context is you have a June time frame for changing the plan. I don't know if you'll hit that time frame, but you're going to be advertising for a general plan in the same zone, the same corridor, the same project. So we have to go out and notice all the cities, put it on the state website, we're amending the general plan, and then we're going to come back in a very short duration after that and say the same thing again. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but you can see the introduction of the confusion in the noticing that everybody's receiving onto it. And I can't say whether the June time frame falls a day late or a day early for the fire department. But the worst case scenario, not making sense, if it's going a positive direction, they can bond for whatever they finally decide to do and watch that change going in the more holistic approach. And if that disappears off the map, which I know I create a lot of controversy, we need to change this overlay. It's your policy to question to what extent. I think I've made my feelings clear about it. And so dropping off the map seems like a feasible reality to it. But a worst case is that's bond. The second worst case is they just change their design to something they're happy with and get it amended. And we don't really need to go after this specific chase. But again, I'm going off the chief telling me he's moving forward as approved.
But I think he's saying he's moving forward as approved because he has no choice. I mean, yes, he has a choice to come back in here, but he's hit some resistance.
No, he has a choice to amend his site plan approval.
He does. But I think we're playing on words when we're saying he is going forward because he is on a time frame and time is costing him money, and he does have to get his fire station done.
Yeah, but that's the critical point. I could make an engineering argument. I'm not the engineer, but I know how to make the engineering argument. I know how to go to the engineer because you can always hire a consultant to say what you want.
Absolutely.
But there's a way to handle that so it doesn't increase the maintenance to him. So if it's truly, truly a maintenance issue, then we can solve that and keep the plan in place with the design. If it's an aesthetic or something he doesn't feel comfortable with, regardless of the engineering, that's a chief's call. And there are options to change. And so I don't see it so critical, but I have to go on the context that I see it in.
From the fire board perspective, apart from the maintenance activity related to the scoring, has he mentioned anything in addition? I mean, if we're telling an old story that's been revised, I mean, I'm hearing you, Corey, and I'm willing to go with you on that, and I'm even willing to say, pull those amendments out of the ordinance, but I need to, the chief's not here to say, wait, but the window is what I'm concerned about.
Well, I think the question is answered by the fact that we wouldn't move forward on it tonight anyway, because the problem with the general plan and that process would have to start at the Planning Commission. And so it's just going to be up to the chief whether or not to apply for a change to the general plan. So he will be the one to answer that question after this meeting.
He was concerned about maintenance and the additional cost of maintenance that in what he is putting in right now, what's on the docket right now. Yes, with the scoring of the cement, a softer cement, not as deep, so.
Well, I want to respect what the Planning Commission is trying to say, because I can understand that there's a disconnect. I'm hoping that the drama of what we're trying to say is played out enough that at least the thought process is here for what we're trying to do, and if it appears, Bill confirming that as well, is that maybe I've got a little bit of a disconnect. I am willing to look at deleting the other amendments to get the one piece that we know will benefit the corridor and the fire station now, and really we throw that back to the chief. He needs to amend or otherwise signal that he absolutely needs it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to communicate to the fire chief, here's your options. You can go to the change, that fits your timeline to change the elements, keep what you got, or if you think it's going to be too long of a period for that to play out, let's get another amendment in. I'm willing to have that communication.
I think that's great, because I'm not willing to put his project timeline at risk. I want the fire station active on the date that he said it was going to be active and servicing the community. And whatever we can do to facilitate that for the right cost, I'm willing to work with him on. So I think we're pretty clear on, or at least I am, on where I want to be on.
Yes, and to be honest with you, I don't want to come at CO and say, oops, you don't have those nice little cuts in the concrete, so we're not signing your CO.
And
that's not a good place for me to be in.
So I do have one question. There is no way of doing this without a full-fledged general plan amendment.
Well, there is. You ignore it and pass it anyway.
Right, but other than that, there's nothing else.
It has to go through the process.
So Corey, hypothetically, suppose that this doesn't quite meet what the chief wants, and he wants to change that, and he brings it to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission doesn't like the change. Then what? Then what's the next step after that?
Well, don't cut it so that his proposed design change is so coarsely said no.
Okay.
The ordinance allows a discussion to take place, and so there would be some fluid elements associated with that. Why is that important? Because the chief has an appeal process. If the Planning Commission operates randomly with the decision on it, he can go in, I know it's a hurdle, but he can set up for an appeal. The last thing that anybody at a staff, at a commission, even the fire chief, is to be so coarse and cut and dry, negotiate a solution that's acceptable to the parties under the ordinance, make the findings okay. So I think at a staff and commission level, we can resolve whatever that design concern is and get something passed. But if it doesn't, then the answer is no, it's an appeal. It adds to how many days did it take to get that done.
See, that's what concerns me, is that then it adds to, and it's a hypothetical, and it may not take place at all. But if on the off chance that it did, then we're looking at that window that's already short, that we already know the architect is under the gun. But there's one more key thing in the thought process for me, and that is that I, as a city council member, have the responsibility to deal with the public funds. It's my job to make sure the taxpayer funds are being expended in a proper way. It's not the planning commission's job.
Correct.
And so I have a different role to play than they do.
Yeah, and here's where I'm putting my neck out on the line and could get it chopped off really quick. Okay. Is that taking the general plan and the amendment process through in this narrow position, you know, that takes us X amount of time and X amount of outcomes. X? Well, you've got to do a general plan 10 days in advance, post your public hearing, so we're out minimum, my guess is a month and a half.
Okay.
At a minimum place to get it back and turned into you.
More likely 60 days.
Yeah. So from my standpoint, and maybe I'm being too editorially honest, the friction that's between the Planning Commission and City Council is a little off of north. I don't know if it's just 10%, 10 degrees, but it's off of north. Their message, I think, in the recording is pretty clear about where their position is. Whether they rightly turn down an ordinance change and then that we've noticed it and you can overturn it, I think you have the power to do it. So if they came back in a negative view and said, no, after all the noticing, we don't support it for X number of reasons, you come back, clearly your desire is to solve the issue, there's a good chance that you'll just simply overturn that recommendation. I'm playing my Vegas odds. Maybe you won't. Maybe you would change your mind. But I would rather.
Well, I think you're just summarizing what the last meeting was.
Yeah,
it was.
That's what you're summarizing. That's already happened.
Yeah. So my gamble is rather than spend the month and a half to do that, I'd rather get with the architect, the chief, and say, let's come up with a design plan and an amendment that we can negotiate and get passed, and let the Planning Commission have that space to make that decision. So there isn't this further tensioning that's going on. And gamble that gets done successfully, because I think that's a predominant outcome in this gamble. And then we'll improve this off of north place with this holistic approach with wherever we're going with this June, July deadline. And so I'm gambling I can get something through in a more positive light with the chief and the commission than the negative light that would come out by pushing this one element with the planning commission.
Well, I've reached out to several of the planning commissioners, and there's quite a bit of, I think, apprehension on all sides through misunderstandings.
Yes.
The keeping the two bodies apart from a autonomy standpoint is good. It looks like it has not been particularly effective in terms of understanding the mindset. And I think we can change that. And we're going to have to when it comes to an accelerated timeline on Main Street. There's going to have to be a lot more that goes along with that and a lot more of that collaboration. With regards to this, I think, I feel like I've put out all the signaling and noticing of what the intent is and why I feel the way I do. So I'm comfortable in moving forward with a motion to strike Section 2 and Section 3.
So are you making that motion?
Yes.
So there's a motion on the table for ordinance number 2019-01, where we're striking Section 2 and Section 3 of that ordinance. Do we have a second?
Say that again, 2 and?
So Section 2 and Section 3. So we would be keeping Section 1, which is the amendment we already debated, and then Section 2 and Section 3 reference the two pieces of the same, basically the second request.
So we'd
end up with a, if this were to pass, it would be sections 1 2, 3, 4. So we'd just be removing 2 and 3, which are the second ask that we had for the Planning Commission, if I read that correctly.
Now, Lisa, didn't you say something about section 4 too?
No, section 2 and 3 are addressing the front yard setback. Section 4 is just the finding, and it's only the finding for the side yard area because there wasn't a finding on the front yard, so you wouldn't have to amend that.
Okay.
I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further debate?
So I just say in support of this piece, I know there's apprehension, but we have to, I would say, let's just put it out bluntly. We need to trust that our planners are not going to attempt to damage the fire station and their ability to perform services and spend taxpayer money correctly, because there's no more we can say on that topic that would resonate any stronger. So I think we should trust them that that's what it is and that they understand what the narrowness of the intent is for that and go with it.
And I think that that's the intent that didn't get thoroughly communicated last time.
And that's what I was going to say. I didn't feel like, I mean, there was one commissioner who said this is to help the fire station, and another commissioner that said, no, this has nothing to do with the fire station. So I don't think, in all fairness, the Planning Commission was given the information that we were given. We knew we were helping the fire station, and I don't think the Planning Commission realized that that's what they were doing.
But that's probably okay because they're really not supposed to make their decisions and view ordinance change. I mean, procedurally.
They shouldn't do it for just one person, but I'm saying I'm not doing it for one person. I'm doing it for the fire station, but I'm okay with it for everyone else.
For everybody.
Exactly.
Not to interrupt, but you're doing it for the fire station from a timing standpoint, not from a conceptual standpoint.
But to be clear, but to be clear, I think what the Planning Commission was saying back to us is that we might be fine with it for this fire station, but we're not fine with it in general because it's changing the plan too drastically without going through the process.
But they didn't even discuss that because once it was brought up, they did not understand why we were looking at it. And they were frustrated with us going, why are they sending this little piece down here?
Yeah.
But it would be,
listening to the recording is pretty fascinating.
But it would be inappropriate for them to understand that. I just want to put that out there, that if we're going to keep the process pure, to recognize that you're saying they were missing a piece of information that then would have made their process different, but it shouldn't have made it different.
That's correct. They should make a decision based on the overall plan and just
so
not
that's
one,
my concern that I brought up to Corey. If the Planning Commission doesn't feel like it's the land use thing that they want, they're not the ones who have the responsibility of the tax dollars. That's
right.
us.
That's right.
Right.
But it still has to go through the Planning Commission, and we still need to listen to
But if you look
their
at the
recommendation.
vote, Tammy, what you ended up with is none of the findings reference the merits of what we're talking about. They're talking only about timing. So at this point, if you were to back up time and they had this additional information, would the discussion been, this is still not good for the corridor, we can see the merits and why this would work for the fire station, but this is not good for the corridor? Nothing in the findings reference that. And that's part of the problem that I see is that those two don't gel. What the Planning Commission is saying is quite clear. I understand where they're at, and that's why I think you're still seeing the disconnect is that the findings that were brought forward don't have anything to do with what we think are the merits of the original application.
So we're getting off track. We're discussing Planning Commission role and City Council role rather than debating the motion that's on the table, in my opinion. So is there more debate on the motion before we take a vote? Okay, so we all understand the motion on the table, so let's do a roll call vote, starting with Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
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 So that motion passes 5-0. I don't think there's anything else on this, so we can move on to
Motion to adopt ordinance 2019-01 as amended.
Second.
Motion to adopt 2019 as amended. There's a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Councilman Ivy.
Aye.
Yes, Councilman Ivy.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-1.
So don't go away, Corey. Because this has been a good spirited discussion on planning commission roles and council roles. In reference to what we've talked about with the upcoming amendments we're trying to look at and changes to the general plan, have you talked to the planning commission about any kind of meeting schedule that would be appropriate? Because, I mean, you're tooling this whole thing up and then you're going to have a big unveiling. Can you get back to us shortly with what that schedule should look like? Because if we accelerate this, that sounds like more than one meeting with the planning commission.
Yeah, Steve, I think we talked about the logistics. It was a February timeframe that we talked about coming back to you with an outline. I know the not city council, the planning commission will have their own work session at their first meeting in February for the planning commission goals for the year. That's separate than talking about the Main Street. But if I recall right, we committed to your second meeting in February, a timeline brought in to the June, and how we would accomplish that. And I did mention what your goal was for a June adoption, but I did not discuss with them any tag teaming, because I'm sensitive right now to the discussion is the council's driving this procedure. Not meaning you're micromanaging it, but you're deciding, sure. and the planning commission knows that timeline to work within.
Sure, but what I'm trying to alleviate is that it's been made very clear that there seems to be on both bodies a throw it over the fence, see what happens, gnash teeth about it on either side of the fence, get back to this. That doesn't sound like a process that ends in June. That doesn't even sound like we get very far by June.
Yeah, and
so
I'm sharing your same worries and hesitation, right? This, not just today, even in the commitment level of that, and trying to wrap my mind around how much public process, how much commission, how much joint discussion, and to be honest with you, I don't have a solution yet. I've been feverishly trying to get your Foothills Plan strategy pre-written prior to the February deadline, because this is going to consume a significant amount of time.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, Corey, is that in direct reaction to what I hear from the Planning Commission and watching their meetings is we're not on the same page. And I've talked to various commissioners and they believe that more meetings will solve that issue. I'm open to it, and with this process, that would be a good place to put it. There's one other item that came up in discussions about this, and Steve, this is more for, it was pointed out to me that the Planning Commission has a small summary of what the council has, the actions the council has taken relative to the Planning Commission, and they have that as a standing agenda item.
Yes.
I think the converse of that would be really great relative to anything, actions that the Planning Commission are taking, so that we can forecast the calendar and we're a little bit more aware. I mean, yes, we can go watch the minutes, but I already have my own meetings to sleep to, so watching theirs in addition is tougher. Can we add that as a standing item? Would you be opposed to that, Mayor?
No, I wouldn't.
You're talking about a report to the council of what the planning commission is doing?
Right, in similar format.
Decisions that they have made.
Decisions.
Approvals that they have granted, wherever they're at.
That would be great.
Put that under city manager report, is that what you're?
I think it would be great, because it'll help, at least from my perspective, help me see a little bit further down the road than the packet I'm getting on a Friday, or I'd like to know much more in advance.
Right. But yeah, your suggestion about joint, we've got to figure out how to I don't think it's impossible to broach, because I've had outside of meeting conversations after the meetings with the Planning Commission, and there is some olive branch discussions going on, like you've mentioned, and so I don't think we're too far out from trying to rebuild that. We just need to get there.
Well,
and early in the process.
Right, and I recognize fully what the Planning Commission does. As I mentioned to these commissioners that I spoke with, look, you just get yelled at. We at least get to throw candy during the parade in addition to being yelled at. So I don't want to minimize what
And
they
we
do.
get to pay for the candy.
And pay
Let's
for
be
the
sure of
candy.
that.
But I want to make sure that as we go through this process, this is not a one-sided thing, because it will not be successful unless both parties are understanding where we're trying to go.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, done pontificating, sorry.
No,
I just
fine.
had to get that out while we're still on this subject.
And it'll be extra fun with all the budget meetings, too.
The further we go, the more Steve will smile, right?
Let's move to item number 5. This is this item is direction, if any, regarding Island View Park renovation Phase 1 project final design. We had a open house on January 10th, as you all know, because you were there. We solicited responses from the public at that time. They were in your packet. McKinsey, I know Bruce is here as well too. Do you want to comment on any of those?
Before McKinsey does, it was added to your, the comments were added just today, so you may not have had a chance to see them. But it's fortunate McKinsey's here in lieu of Jake tonight, because she is familiar with him. And I've invited Bruce to come so he can hear what is said. And you're meeting Friday with the design team, right, Bruce? So anything pertinent for that may come out of this meeting, Bruce is here to hear that. So yeah, McKinsey, do you want to tell them what you've done?
So if you recall, we had computers set up. McKinsey was working hard out in the lobby while we were in here. And she was soliciting, people, come fill out these surveys. So the people that came, I think you got a pretty good percentage of them to fill out surveys, didn't you?
Right, I think there was 25 people who attended and we got 17 responses, not including children. But these documents, I haven't done any condensing of any of the comments that were given, so you can go through and see how each person commented. Not everyone answered every question. There wasn't one large consensus. If anything, the one that was interesting was question 5. It was the only question that we had them rank anything, and the options that were available to rank in order of preference were sand volleyball court, pickleball court, fitness area or equipment, game tables, and then an other. And as you can see here, sand volleyball was first, followed by pickleball, followed by fitness areas, and then a large gap between anything else. And then I have the notes from the designers. There was no hard consensus. People liked one option or the other, but there was no overall majority for one or the other. The votes they got, 3 of them said, we need a splash pad. And then 3 people said, we don't need a splash pad. So there's not anything hard and fast, but I think it is useful to look through the comments. Lots of people did like the designs that were presented on Thursday. Lots of the comments don't have to do with the plans, so there's a lot to weed through there. But the designs were good. A lot of the comments said we like the open space on the top level. We like to keep the open space. There are some safety concerns just by nature of there being multiple levels, but that's not really going to change. And then the climbing aspects and then the sand and the digging seem to come up a lot through the comments.
As positives.
As positives.
So can I ask you, McKinsey, or maybe Bruce, you may know better, on those drawings, they had options for areas. Who's deciding that? Where's that going? What's the process from here? Just for clarification, maybe it's just me that doesn't grasp it completely.
So if there's any direction from the council, that will help with the deciding. But a little bit will be decided by funding. I'm glad to see sand volleyball was high, not just because it's what they want, but it'll be one of the cheaper options that allows us to maybe finish the connection to the top level or something if we're short on money. And sand volleyball could always be changed later on if there was money to change it to something else. So I'm glad to see that was the highest option, just because it gives us a little more freedom in using some money in other areas. The design team will meet with me, and they'll just, we'll just kind of look at different playground amenities, and we'll look at probably costs, and we'll look at preferences and pros and cons, and out of those items, if no one feels strongly one way or the other, we'll just kind of put together a playground and a final design for the rest of you to look at.
So I did have a couple things that if I got to pick, that I would do. I love the sand idea of having a play place, but I think the fossils wear out in their draw more quickly than the digging wears out.
That was a comment that I got too, that's fun one time, and then the kids they're not interested in uncovering those fossils ever again. So
Right.
that was one comment that I thought that probably better to go with the digging ones rather than just the fossils. Yeah.
I got that comment also. Maybe it was the same person that talked to all
Yeah,
of us.
might have been.
But I did get that
Might have
comment.
been.
The only
Yeah.
problem with the digging toys is the kids fight over them. They love them so much.
Maybe we can get an extra digging toy.
I think it would be beneficial to have an idea of the magnitude of the cost of each amenity, so that we can get 3 or 4 lower cost amenities instead of one higher cost amenity.
And the designers, I think, will have a little bit of a handle on that, where they've used all of these different amenities in other playgrounds, but we can look them up in a catalog, what catalog prices are. But then I know there's also some, as playground companies vie for your business, there's some wiggle room too in discounts they can give you and things like that.
Well, my hope is we don't drift too, I think either option 1 or option 2, you could flip a coin and the community would be happy because there's
Right.
plenty of amenities. But if we've listed out the 12 or 13 and then we only end up with 6, that's a lot less.
Right.
So I'm hoping that this comes pretty close to the available dollars. at least
My
in the
understanding
Yeah.
is, unfortunately, that's the case, that there's like 10, 12 options in both 1 and 2, but we're probably only going to get half or less of either.
Yeah, but only 25 people came, so out of 17,000 residents, only 25 people will know that they got disappointed because they're the only ones who knew about the expectation.
Well, and I don't know about that. We have the space for 10 or 12 activities, and so it might be you put in an activity that's a little less expensive, like a sand volleyball pit, that can be upgraded later on. But I think you can still probably put in the same number of activities, but maybe you do choose a few less expensive ones.
I just want to say that I think that's the really great thing about the very thorough process we went through in hiring the design firm that we did, because there's not a strong consensus from the community. Everyone's going to have a different personal opinion.
Yeah.
And so you just say, you know what, you guys are the professionals, design an awesome park, everyone's going to love it, great.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I can see. One example is the rope on the slope. That's going to be a lot less expensive than doing that spider web net up the slope. But they're both going to be fun climbing up and down that slope. But I think one's going to be quite a bit more expensive than the other. But I don't know. We'll look and see. And once we start getting some prices, I think we'll still, regardless, we'll come up with a really fun product.
So are you personally leaning towards option 1 or option 2? If the decision was yours,
I could go either way too. I could see fun things with the main themes were either the berms or the half balls that go all through it. I could see either one of those being a lot of fun and different from other playgrounds where it's pretty much a flat surface with activities all around. So I think that's kind of a fun idea, that it will be different from everything else around, is that our playground is going to be multiple levels and surfaces and berms and things you can lay down or hide behind or run up and jump off of, and I think that in itself will be fun.
Well, thank you. Mackenzie, thanks for tabulating those results and sharing with us. Bruce, thanks for being here tonight. It sounds like that.
So they'll move forward. We'll talk Friday, and we'll move forward with making a final design that will then come back to everyone to look at. The Parks and Rec Committee will bounce their ideas off of them and see what they think. So that'll be the next thing you see is a final design that could still be minorly tweaked, but we'll go from there.
Great. Sounds fun.
Great. Anything else?
You might want to stick around for the next subject, Bruce.
Okay.
So thanks, Bruce. Item number 6. Now, one thing I said to Bruce, I said, let's put a little building around that rail that Sean White used to slide down and charge money, to go see this rail that Sean White. So that kind of leads into item 6, discussion of naming rights for park improvements and possible donations.
So is that sponsored by IHC or Aetna?
Exactly.
This comment from the mayor, sponsored by.
So, this is a possible policy to allow naming rights for park improvements to encourage donations. Councilman Entz, do you want to lead off on that?
We have, and I'm not sure where we learned it, but we have learned that the funding that we received this year has not been included in the next federal budget. So the continuation of the development is going to be made that much more difficult. We talked several months, maybe even a year ago, about naming rights and advertising and the potential conflict if they are commercial in parks that have federal funds. We have the new Tingey Pavilion coming online shortly. I just think that with that as a backdrop, we ought to try to explore any additional way to raise funds to try and help complete what we've started. And so maybe there's another family who would like to put a pavilion up at Island View. Or maybe someone would like to have a child's name on a soccer field, or any other number of items. Now, as I talked to Lisa about it, one of the concerns that was raised was, is it permanent? In other words, if we come up with, just to pull a number out of the air, $5,000 towards a soccer field, does that last for all of time? Or kind of the way things are going at can I remember the full transition of names? Delta Center,
Energy
Solutions Arena,
Vivint
Arena, and whatever it is now. Is there an amount of money that secures something for a 2 or 3 year period, and then maybe it becomes something else? I don't think we want to get into something like that. I think we set some kind of a level that's fairly steep, and if they've put in the majority of the money that it takes to create that amenity, then it becomes semi-permanent, if not permanent, as long as the amenity is there. We don't want to be in a position that because, even the Tingeys, because they've put that pavilion in, it has to be there and be rebuilt 100 years from now. So as long as it's there in the same condition, it stays, would be my push. But I'd like to get something into the website, into the newsletters, to try and encourage people to think about it.
Lisa,
That's
you're
it.
smiling like you'd like to say something.
Well, I did talk to Councilmember Ince when he requested that this be put on the agenda, because I do just have some concerns, I think, before you move forward with encouraging donations. I mean, understand, people can donate right now, and they can do that, and if you would like to name something, you can, just like we did with the Tingeys, and there's no obligation. So it's always available. But if you want to actively encourage selling parts of your park off to get donations, in my opinion, that's a different step that we need to look into and think about. Generally, you need to have a written policy so everybody knows what dollar amount is going to get you what size recognition. You need to think about that blurred line between recognition and advertising. Are you going to just allow individuals? Are you because I do think that you can sell your park out and it's an advertising place rather than a park for people to go and have a nice time with nature, or with the park. So there are some issues in my opinion with it, and also definitely our federally funded areas. So, but certainly if the council wants to do it, great, we can do some research, and I think that was my opinion was, sure, let's put it on the agenda if you really want to put this on the to-do list or on a higher priority, you know, give us some input on that as well. But certainly people can donate right now, and I guess if you're saying, hey, we need some donations, I'm not opposed to that kind of newsletter, and you could just leave it open and say, okay, yeah, we'll, you know, if we want to be nice, you could certainly do that. But I would definitely caution you about any long-term commitment to putting somebody's name on something, because things change. Signs cost a lot of money. You know, I don't really think you should bind future councils or the city with, hey, we're going to leave this on here forever. A lot of the naming rights, because I have drafted a naming rights contract or policy for the theater, which has never been used, but it's a great policy that I've drafted. No, I can't say it's great.
Nobody's hit the dollar on.
Yeah, maybe not. But we really thought it would encourage, you know, that was the recommendation back then. Hey, we need a policy. Okay, great, let's put the policy in place. It just really hasn't.
For background, could we get you to send each of us a copy of that?
Yeah. So I think you can do it, but again, you can also just ask people to please donate and then just decide what sorts of things you want to name. And then the other thing I was going to say is a lot of times in these policies, we do say we reserve the right to remove this, even if we said we'd keep it up for X number of years if there's any sort of political issue or just if some, you know, let's say they're arrested and we don't want to be putting their name up on our.
Another consideration is we don't want to put ourselves in the position of committing to sponsorship, and then let's say we decide, you know, let's wait until the 2020 budget, federal budget comes out, because maybe this funding comes back and we want to apply, but then we've already committed to get $50,000 from a citizen, which would then maybe negate our ability to get $600,000 from the federal government.
Well, we got the $50,000 from Tingy's, and it isn't causing a problem on the park.
That's not a park that has used that federal grant. Bruce, do you want to speak to that as far as when we're planning on?
It is a federal grant.
It is. Community park?
Yeah, it actually has the same Land Water Conservation Fund grant, not on the expansion, but on the original 25 acres.
Which is why we have the problem on the futsal.
And the restrictions are with professional sports. You're not, it has
not personal names at all.
Right. You can't.
Or commercial.
Commercial, because they're a for-profit. The RSL, Utah Jazz, they're for-profit, and that's where the rule is in that grant is you can't advertise for a for-profit organization or let them have control or scheduling or anything because it's supposedly open to all of the public and not to benefit this for-profit organization. I think that you could still have all of your options open with grants and receive all the donations that anyone wanted to give, and maybe you're required to match that grant. But there's nothing saying that you can't add to funds, more things to that park or make things even greater or better, a better playground, or go back on the first phase and put in some more expensive things. Or I don't think you're.
Is there anything that
limits us? I don't think you're going to hurt yourself by accepting donations at all. I think the restrictions are that you match it, and there are some rules on how that gets matched. Sometimes donations help you with that match, and we'll have to read. Every grant's a little different, but it might even be that some of those donations help meet part of the city's obligation for their side of the match. So.
That's what I was going to ask.
And I know that's the case with some other grants. I'm not sure with land water conservation if that all has to be from the city, but I know it's not. I know some of it can be in kind, in labor and different things. So,
okay, great, thank you.
So in the discussion that took place, somebody, I don't remember who it was, Steve wasn't there that night, so it was probably you that said that we've got the the bricks over at the park, and $50 donation costs us $20, and you get your name in a brick at the park, right?
Yeah, it's a Rotary Club fundraiser for the monument, the Veterans Memorial Monument. But we also did it for a fundraiser for the now Smith Park playground. That if you wanted to get your family's name or business or anything, they could buy a brick. And we had a buy a brick campaign. I think there was a booth at the 4th of July trying to solicit people to buy a brick. And I think our cost is about $20. We buy the brick and to get it laser etched, and then a little bit of labor of pulling an old one out and putting a new one in. I can't remember. Steve, do you know, was it a $50? How much did it cost to buy a brick? Was it 50 or was it 100? Or?
You mean from the Rotary? Or
Yeah, if you know.
What did Rotary sell them for? Is that
right? How much did it cost to buy a brick?
Well, the Rotary didn't make much on. They really didn't. It was $35.
$35. Okay.
It still is, I think, and it basically just covers the cost.
It might have been that for the playground too. I don't know that. I thought it was.
I think we charged more than that for the playground, didn't we?
Because the idea was to raise some money, so I think it was. I thought it was at $50. So for every brick we sold, we made about $30.
I don't remember for sure. No.
So those ideas come from brick selling at Centerpoint Theater, and because they sold bricks at Centerpoint Theater, and you could also
we were way
buy
before
a seat.
We were way before them. They stole it from us.
And I think they charged $100 a brick, if I remember.
And then they started selling their seats and their rehearsal halls and everything else. But it started with us. No. Actually, we got the idea from Hale Theater. The old Hale Theater had bricks going all the way up to the
one in West Valley.
West Valley.
Yeah.
But theater was definitely after us.
Anything we can do to augment it and create interest, I think, is beneficial. And so I wasn't trying to get a decision tonight. I was trying to get it on the table and get it discussed, and hopefully get it in future newsletters, get something on the website, maybe try and create some competitive excitement.
Well, I haven't sat in a theater seat in years that hasn't been sponsored, except in the Eccles Theater, which hasn't sold their seats yet, but is named Eccles. And I've actually looked at how that funding model works, because the Eccles Foundation is everywhere in theater all across the state. And the way that it works is they pay an initial upfront for the naming rights, and then the foundation is paying a maintenance on an annualized basis to maintain the naming rights. So that's why you see those going on. So you may end up with some sort of watermark like that a foundation or an individual can sponsor a soccer field, and there is a set time frame, and then if they want to continue that, it comes with a maintenance amount from the foundation. And I really don't have a problem with, it could be a swing set, if it had a little a placard on it, a little brass tab that says this is sponsored by whoever family. That's unobtrusive and not offensive to me. The reason I've always reacted badly with commercials, I don't want to turn it into a big advertising thing, but with like the seats in the theaters, it's a little brass plate that's under my arm, and if I'm interested, I'll look. If not, it doesn't really change my theater experience. And if it's something similar, and you can figure out a way, Bruce, to get little brass plates on however small of a piece of equipment that you can get it on, great, sponsor it all.
Well, and I think the brick idea, has been very unintrusive over at the park. People who don't know about it maybe don't know about it. Maybe they walk on those bricks and don't notice that there's names and things on it. But everyone who has a brick over there loves to go over there and find their brick and show it to their friends and things like that. So, and we could do that same thing, that buying a brick helps to build this playground. And maybe it's not a specific amenity in that playground.
Well, and on the amenities, I would assume it would work the same way with theater seats. The expectation when you buy when you sponsor a theater seat, it is only until the next renovation.
Yeah.
So that when they tear the seat out, your sponsorship went with it.
Yeah.
So that it's not this is forever my seat. So that's something to consider.
So I think we need to be creative in what ways. Come up with ways of where we can raise funds.
Maybe make a policy of different levels, like you're talking about. Maybe there's a brick level, and maybe there's a soccer field level, and maybe there's a gold, silver, diamond, or something. I don't know.
Sounds like a good assignment to the Parks Committee, doesn't it? to come to talk about the ideas.
Talk about it, share it, let's,
They're pretty expensive toys.
Tell them to watch lots of PBS or NPR during pledge drive. They'll get plenty of ideas.
So I took that look as you could bring it up with the Parks Committee. Is that true?
Yeah, you bet, you bet. I know the Parks Committee has some ideas of their own. They're putting together some ideas to maybe bonding, maybe getting everyone to help participate in funding.
Yeah, I'm just looking on my computer. I thought I had prepared a policy, but I can't find it, so it might have just been a lease provision to the
I
theater.
remember reading it in the lease provision, but there was a dollar amount associated with what the naming rights sold for.
There was a dollar amount?
I'm pretty sure there was.
All right, well, maybe,
I know the baseball coordinator it worked quite a bit on trying to see if he couldn't get a big donor to name one of the ball fields after and put his name on the backstop or something. And it hasn't come to fruition, but I know they've been working on that, trying to get some donors to help to fund some batting cages.
that's accomplished what I wanted to do, is to, let's get it out there, let's start to think about it. I guess, like to maybe see, and whether it's Bruce or the Parks Committee, someone assigned to try and carry it out. Work with Lisa about getting something formalized so that we start to do it, something on the website, and so forth.
Everybody okay with that? Do we?
do you want to assign someone?
I would recommend you task the Parks Committee with discussing these ideas and come back with some.
I'll put it on their next agenda to discuss and
Great.
make
It's been brought up by them before too, so I think
has
they'd be
it?
happy to explore it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
there may not be a policy, but I will contact the theater, and maybe it was generated on their side, and I'm just thinking of the lease amendment, but I'll see if there's something.
All right, great. Let's move on. Thank you, Bruce, for hanging out with us. Don't leave. We're all kind of lonely. Nobody here. Hey, where you going?
He was serious.
Okay. Let's go to item number 7, Mayor's Report. My report mainly tonight, because I think it'll take a little bit of time, is what it says here, the processing calendar for interviewing city manager candidates. Before I do that, in conjunction with our discussion at the fire department today, and everybody realizing that you have to spend some money to be safe, is yesterday we did approve a $145,000 brush truck to help up on the foothills and down in the lowlands as well too, in conjunction with last year. Obviously, we got that ladder truck and we got another ambulance, and so.
Do we know where the brush truck is going to be centrally
Housed.
based?
Which station?
Which station's going to have it?
We did not discuss that, but
Okay.
I'll find that out. But yeah, we didn't discuss that, where it was going to be based. So, so let's go to the process and calendar for interviewing city manager candidates. So, I'll summarize, and Steve and Lisa, maybe McKinsey can fill in as well too. So the process closed last Friday. As I guessed, we had plenty of resumes come in between the 2nd and the 11th of November. We ended up getting 48 resumes. They're in the process right now of going through the minimum qualifications, which Steve and Lisa were doing. And they felt, when I talked with them this morning, that that would probably eliminate 8 to a dozen, I don't know, but.
Yeah, Lisa and I have both been through them, but we haven't met. We're meeting tomorrow morning to compare our notes. I ended up with about 8 that are out, and Lisa fewer than that. So there's room for a judgment, because when you're trying to interpret or equivalent education and experience, we're going to have some different views. So we're coming together in the morning to see how we feel about those. But I'm going to say you'll probably end up with about 40 that will go on to the next phase.
So then this next step after that is we have the resume review panel. And this panel will consist of the city manager, myself, and Councilwoman Meekum, and 2 department heads. Correct me if I'm missing anything, okay? They will narrow it down to around 10 or so for the recommending committee. The recommending committee to include all the department heads, myself. We actually had a city manager from a neighboring community. At one time it said current or neighboring community, but that in the latest draft was a neighboring community. And a municipal expert, was that on there too? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is where we were at in the process. So we looked at that, and based on the number of resumes, we determined that, and I'm telling you what Steve and I and Lisa discussed today, and we want you to weigh in to see if you feel okay about it. We discussed that the resume review panel would, by next Wednesday, since with the sheer number of resumes, be able to get through those to narrow it down to the 10. We then talked about the recommending committee interviewing either on the 31st or of January or the 6th of February with, and this is a little change from the schedule, with then the city council recommending like the next day, because there could be a number of people coming from out of town, and as it was originally looking at, you'd be bringing somebody in to interview, and then if you brought them back, it'd be just a week later. So that was looked at. Now, it was also discussed about background checks, because there was some concern there. Mm-hmm. And the chief and I talked with Jolene today, and even when we hire an employee, just the basic background check, she indicates it takes about 2 days to get information back. A more extensive one, the chief was checking into that. Did he let us know on the more extensive one how long that takes?
Did you get his email today, Lisa, like I did?
Yes, I did get his email, and also talked with BCI over the phone. BCI's position is that we are not allowed, even as an employer, to conduct this kind of significant background check using our BCI. I have a different opinion on the statutes, but I think we're going to honor BCI's issue at this point, and we'll just discuss with them further some recent amendments to the statute, as even in the 2018 legislative session, which I think specifically addresses employer background checks with BCI, but they're not interpreting it that way. I don't want to put the chief in a position that he's not comfortable with his license for BCI, so we're not going to do BCI. But there's a lot of different checks. So BCI will give you everything, arrest records, conviction, et cetera. And in my opinion, in the employment sector, we don't need the arrest record, because we shouldn't be looking at that. It's mainly convictions, and it's mainly recent convictions and convictions that are, job related, et cetera. So I am fine going with the route that there's 2 other options that we can go with, but what we normally use for employees, but that's the 1 to 2 days. So, but the dilemma is with this new proposal where the department heads interview on one day and the council interviews the next day, in my opinion, we do not have the time to do the background check in between, because the new statute says we cannot ask about criminal background and we cannot do a criminal background check before the initial interview. The initial interview would be with the department heads. So we're kind of proposing, if you want to go with Steve and the mayor's option of this bang bang, then I think we need to alter the request for the background check that would be after. Now, what we could do is, you know, the council's going to have to select who they want to interview, and we're leaving that open. You could interview the top 3 as recommended, or you could go all the way back to the 6 or the 10, you have to decide. But you could interview them on that Friday or the next day after the department head's interview, and then we could conduct the background checks even on all of those that you interviewed or on your top candidate, whatever you'd like. But that would be a change to what's proposed in our recruitment process. We were looking at more of a week for the department heads to interview and decide, and then a week for the council. But I think it makes some practical sense of what the mayor and Steve are proposing, which is, let's just bring them all in, because we have received a lot of applications from out of state. You know, I suspect some of your candidates will be from out of town. This would give them time to just come out once. With what's proposed in our current procedure, they'd have to come out twice. So those are the options.
So if we go with the consolidated option, you as council members would be interviewing on either Friday the 1st or Thursday the 7th. Is that correct, Steve?
And I was, sorry, kind of looking at this, I've finally had a calendar in front of me, which is much easier for my brain. But so on the 23rd, if we decide on who we're going to interview by Wednesday, January 23rd, if you want to give people 2 weeks, you know, you could do, I think you'd said the 6th and the 7th, but travel arrangements might be easier to just do Thursday, Friday. And
yeah, well, I was assuming you need to give them 7 days, because that's to get a decent airline price, isn't it? 7 days a week or something like that?
You want 14.
Is it 14?
14 is the...
If you
14
want,
is preferred.
With something like Southwest, it's 2 weeks.
Okay, so you couldn't
Quite a
do
few
the
airlines.
31st then of
but again,
January.
remember, so it depends if you're deciding early in the day and you're making phone calls on the 23rd. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and then they'd have to make that arrangement that day. I just don't see that we have to rush. I would prefer to put 2 weeks in between when we decide who we're going to interview, so we can use the rest of that week to call them, let them decide, let them make some arrangements, because it's still probably going to be under the 14 days, even if we call them on the 23rd, unless I guess they could jump on.
So are you thinking February 11, Tuesday and Wednesday?
No, I was actually thinking the 7th and the 8th. But technically, you could do it the 31st and the 1st. But we also, after, with this proposal is department heads interview in the morning, department heads do the field trip in the afternoon. Department heads meet with the city council that night, Thursday night, and say, here's our recommendations. The council decides that night who they want to interview. Somebody calls them at 10 o'clock at night, or else we call them at 8 and say, yeah, you got the second interview. And, you know, we schedule who's coming in when. And then the council makes the decision on the night of February 8th or thereafter. And then we could actually, we do want to get this on your February 19th city council meeting to approve, because that's your last meeting in February. You know, and if they want a 30-day notice, that's our last meeting to approve a contract. Now, we could push that out to a special meeting if the contract negotiations play out, but.
I trust staff to figure out the best timeline.
We're going to be really busy. Main Street and city manager and
Compensation study.
and compensation.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why I think we do need your input. What days do you want to dedicate in full
Yes,
to
that-
interview the city manager applicant?
That's what I'm asking. Like, that's why I threw out what we discussed and.
I like the concept of dedicating Friday for multiple reasons. One, it's easier for me to arrange a full Friday if I need to do that. It's also preferential if I were a candidate. I've got to be out there. I'm going to do my due diligence over the weekend after my interviews, because we're not going to tell them that night, right?
Presumably not.
So in theory, they're driving around town, making sure this is what they really want before they get the nod the next week. So I think that makes sense to do it that way.
Do we have any kind of a feel for this, at this point, for percentage of the people that are out of town versus in town?
I'm going to guess that maybe a third were out of state,
Yeah, I was gonna say not half, but
maybe a third.
yeah, a third.
Okay. So there's a reasonably significant chance that we're going to be hiring from out of town.
Well, you'll be interviewing.
You mean, hire, when you say out of town, what, do you mean out of town or out of state? Because
Out of the metropolitan area.
Out of Wasatch Front. So-
I would say most of your applicants are along the Wasatch Front.
But with as many as you said out of state, that's a reasonable chance that we'll be interviewing.
Yeah, there would be a couple in that 10 that would be out of state.
Sure, if a third,
Yeah.
that means, in theory, a third of the final group are going to be out of state. I just wondered.
Okay, so are we talking about Friday then? That Friday, the 8th of February? That day works for me.
It sounds like we're deciding on that because of the 2 weeks flight notice, right? Rather than the 31st, or 31st and the 1st. Yeah, it would be the 8th that we would be interviewing. It says Thursday night, the 7th. The recommending committee would be,
Meeting with the council, so Thursday
Yes.
night, the 7th, and just block
That
off
Friday,
the 8th.
Friday, the 8th works for me, and it's better than the week before or the week after. So that's my feedback.
The 31st, yeah, the 31st is the alternative.
In terms of offer acceptance, what are we giving the candidate in time? So if we interview on the 8th and we come to a consensus, we've got to give them an offer letter. How long do they have to accept it? Because if they say no, candidate number 2, depending on the timeline, we're out of time to offer a second candidate and still have that by the 19th.
That means we'll have a
So
special
you'd
meeting.
call on February 11th. I think it's typical to give 48 hours. I don't know. I'm just trying to think the last time I
Why can't we
interviewed.
call on, I mean, if we're going to try and make a decision on the 8th, why can't we call on the 9th?
Yeah. Yeah, we could.
You could, true.
Notify them on the 9th, that's fine.
I mean, it is a Saturday, but in theory, this person is interested.
Sure.
Yeah.
And therefore, they're going to be,
Rather than later.
if I was in this
Yeah.
position, I would want to know sooner rather than later.
Well, I think if we set the expectation up front, look, if you are offered an interview and you are offered the position, you will be required to accept within X number of days, and set that up front.
And now that I look at it, actually, March 5th is close enough to 30 days' notice. I think you could use that as well for your meeting date.
If we had.
Yeah,
oh, you're talking
Which-
city council.
right. Because it depends. It may take a little negotiating on the contract, but.
Well, as long as we end up with a definite and a really good alternate, and the time combined between their two offers does not exceed, so let's say you give them 48 hours, so you've got times 2 to get you the potential, if we end up with the first candidate bowing out.
I
We
think
just
that
need to
could
make
work.
sure
I
it
think we
fits.
could push it to the 5th for the contract.
I'll work a week into April if I have to.
Okay, so are we saying 7th,
So-
evening of the 7th and the 8th?
That's, it sounded like that's okay. We've heard from 2 or 3, yeah.
I just want to make sure
Fire,
specifically
you
that
good?
Councilmember McEwen is okay, though, that we would not be able and would not do the background check before the council interviews your top. So in that case, you may want to interview your top 4 rather than your top 3.
Well,
All right.
practicality is, and the more I've thought about this over time, is that if they've got continued experience in the areas that we're asking for concentration, they've either been successful in passing a background check as they've increased in their managerial responsibilities, or they've been really good at hiding it. So I'm not saying the background check goes away, but depending on what comes out of the resume review, that may be, it may be self-selecting to start with.
I think that's a fair statement.
Still want to make sure they're right at the end, though, of course.
Okay, so you're going to block out Thursday night, the 7th, and Friday, the day. Correct?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Does that start at 8 or does that start?
Just block it out. You mean in the evening or the daytime?
No, in the morning.
Oh, we won't start you before 8.
How about if we don't start, oh, no.
Or
that's
before
fine. No,
you get
I'm
your
fine
kids
with
off to
either.
school.
Yeah, I mean, I would say before 9, but I'm fine either way.
Yeah.
So we're doing Thursday night as well?
Well, Thursday night is when you would meet with department heads to receive their recommendations, their ranking of those up to 10 candidates that have been interviewed that day on Thursday.
Yeah. And anyone else on the recommending committee?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
I think the intent, because the intent, I think, was for the department heads to give you, here's the, say they interviewed 10. Here's our ranking of those 10 candidates. And you decide how many of those.
But here's our.
Are you talking Thursday night, the 7th?
Yeah, here's our
Well,
top
how
three.
do we interview people on the 8th if we didn't make a decision?
Well, they're here in town.
They're already interviewed.
We'll make a
7th.
This is
by
just
the other group.
our sub-selection of the initial filter from the department head. So if they said there's 10 ranked in order, if we say we're interviewing 3 or 4, if they're close enough, there's no distinction between 1 and 5, then we say we'll interview 5, and then I start making phone calls that night.
The recommending committee is saying that when they leave, hey, you may get a call for a follow-up interview tomorrow.
So we will tell
Okay.
those from out of state that are flying in that they don't want to fly out until Friday afternoon or evening.
Considering the length of the discussion that this council likes to have, we might want to start at 6, not 7 on Thursday night.
Oh, I thought you said 6 a.m. Friday morning.
No, 6 p.m. Thursday night.
I'm wondering if the department heads will be done by then.
Yeah, we've got to work out all those details about that day with the department heads.
All right.
That's true, they're interviewing a lot more.
For now,
Do
just,
they need to be,
we can refine this later, but for now, block out that night, Thursday night, and the day Friday.
okay. All right, can we move on?
Awesome.
Back to, the agenda. So, city manager report. Steve, did you have anything?
Do you want me to ask about the insert rec district? If they pay for
Sure,
it?
yeah.
Tammy asked me today about the possibility of the recreation district paying for an insert in our utility bill about a survey that they're doing. And I said, well, first she asked if we were doing an insert at the end of January, and I said we didn't plan on it because we just did the newsletter. But we could do an insert, but it costs about $300 to do so, and if the recreation district is willing to pay for it, I suspect that the council would be willing to let it go in because it is one of those sister agencies, if you will, for the benefit of our community. So you okay with that? Okay, all right, that's it. Believe it or not, that's all I have.
Let me just, did you check our newsletter policy?
Well, this is a public entity that, yeah, that
Okay.
I'm
That was
comfortable the
listed.
policy covers
Our
that.
citizens are members of.
Yeah.
And pay taxes too.
It's a
So.
governmental entity that we belong to. Yeah, we even have a representative on the board. So yes, I'm confident the policy's fine with that. It's just the idea that it may be totally their thing and their insert, but if they pay for it, then I presume you wouldn't have a problem with that. Okay.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity,
Yeah.
does the Recreation District do any kind of naming type thing, Tammy? I've never noticed it over there.
No, we have not ever done that nor discussed it as policy.
Okay, just curious.
All right, I don't know of a need for a closed meeting. Anyone else? Let me just say on 10, I'm going to have some appointments in 2 weeks. And 4 weeks probably as well, too. I also should tell you that we have some sub-chairs for the 4th of July that are continuing on, but our chair was not, as you know. I had asked the chair 10 days ago, and yesterday they had some family emergencies and weren't available, so I have asked another chair as of about 6 o'clock tonight, and they're going to get back to me. So if they don't come through, if anybody else has any great names, I have others as well too, but if, I'm welcome to suggestions as well too on that, if anybody else knows somebody just would love to do it. And those that backed out, they really wanted to do it. I mean, they were excited to do it. They had some great ideas. I met with them last Tuesday night for 2 hours at their house. So just wanted to let you know about that as well too. So.
Well, good. You have a name for the next year.
Exactly. I said that to them too. So, then anything else? I'll entertain a motion. If nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
So it was a naming rights agreement that I did, not the policy. Do you want to?
Did that have a dollar amount on it? I thought it did. It was like $1 million something. Was it? Was it that high?
It was in the.
Push the button.